Okay, everybody, thanks for coming here today. We're going to get underway straight away because otherwise we're going to lose time at the end, and we want to basically get everything said that needs to be said today. So we're delighted to see at the event today Make Fishing Fair, unlocking Article 17 for a just fishing future. My name is Luke Ming-Flanagan, MEP from Ireland, and I am chairing the meeting today and not saying a lot other than that. So for the past 4 decades, successive common fisheries policies have favoured large-scale, high-volume fishing operations, often at the expense of small-scale coastal fisheries. Article 17 was intended to correct this imbalance by reallocating fishing opportunities to low-impact fisheries. And we're going to go straight away to our first speaker, who's going to do a welcome and an introduction and an overview of the meeting's objectives. Marta Carvalho from LIFE, Low Impact Fisheries of Europe's Executive Secretary. And you have 5 minutes, and I'm going to be brutal on the 5 minutes.
Thank you, Luke. So thank you, I'm Marta. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Low Impact Fishers of Europe. So on behalf of the 10,000 small-scale fishers in Europe that are our membership, we wanted to express that we have a mixed feelings of being here today and for LIFE to co-organize this important event in the European Parliament together with Blue Ventures. So thank you, Blue Ventures, as well. From one side, we are so glad to have had some great response from many MEPs that are hosting this event. So thank you. Isabella, Emma and Luc, and contributing to the discussion and even present in the room from almost all parties. And also from the Commission to discuss Make Fishing Fair, unlocking Article 17 for a just fishing future. But at the same time, we feel disheartened that it's been more than 12 years now that LIFE has been, and the small-scale fishers have been working to make this CFP provision achieve the full potential without tangible success. It feels a bit like Groundhog Day, if you allow me the expression. However, almost a year after the publishing of the Make Fishing Fair letter, signed by 37 member organizations and the support of 20 social and environmental NGOs, and also as we are immersed in a process of consultation for the evaluation of the CFP, we thought it was highly relevant to try once more to highlight the importance of this article. When Article 17 was approved in the reform of the CFP, we were very hopeful. We really saw the potential of allocating the fishing opportunities in a transparent manner and using environmental, social and economic criteria to realize LIFE's aims, which is to achieve fair fisheries, healthy seas and vibrant communities. Article 17 has the potential not just to provide a fair access to resources for the small scale, but also it would provide a mechanism to reward those that provide the most benefits to the society, that fish with a lower impact and provide the highest social benefits. It could enable a slow and planned transition over the years and provide a true incentive for making sustainable fisheries a reality. However, years has gone by and this article has remained dormant in most of the member states, whilst historic catches remain the main criterion used for fishing opportunity allocation, and therefore keeping rewarding those that fish the most and have the biggest impacts. We all know the results of such a lack of implementation. We have declining and overexploited stocks, and the small-scale fishers are at a turning point and a danger of disappearing, as you will hear from them today. With them, we could not lose only the strategic socioeconomic sector that they are, the communities dependent on them, but also all their potential. So I would be happy if we could leave the room today with every one of us understanding how critical the implementation of Article 17 is, and that the European Commission and the Member States start working together as a matter of urgency to set clear guidelines and a binding implementation plan on how to make this happen, and finally bridge the gap between policy and practice, in line with the Green Deal agenda and the SDG 14B goal in which EU has signed on to. So thank you. And maybe we could pass the floor to the video. I think we have screened. Yeah. Thank you.
Common fisheries policy legally requires EU countries to allocate fishing opportunities based on transparent and objective criteria. This should include considering the benefits for society, the economy, and the environment. But in reality, countries give higher quotas to those that have always caught the most: industrial vessels. In doing so, governments mostly disregard the damage to marine habitats and species and the carbon footprint of fisheries from sea to plate. They also sideline the importance of the vessel in terms of job creation and its contribution to the local economy. This favours industrial fleets over artisanal vessels. And it's not the European Union deciding this, but each country individually.
So here in Denmark, we've introduced coastal fishing scheme as a vehicle actually where we can transition into this low-impact fishing. It's gill nets, it's hooks, it's traps, everything static, which means you don't need any energy to pull any gear across the bottom floor, which minimizes, of course, the effect on the bottom. It's also a very selective type of fishing and also is good for climate. And we're hoping to see, of course, a new generation of low-impact fishermen and women, but it's very difficult if there are no rights. Healthy fish stocks are a good business, so we should work together to secure that for the future.
To make fisheries fair, EU countries should allocate fishing opportunities focusing on environmental, social and economic criteria and rely less on historical catches. They should also be transparent in terms of the criteria they use, their methodology and the details of the vessels receiving the fishing opportunities.
El sistema de reparto está basado en históricos de captura. Las pesquerías artesanales no están basadas en una cantidad, sino en una calidad. Si tenemos que competir para conseguir cuotas con alguien que produce muchísimo con una calidad inferior, no se está valorando los puestos de trabajo, no se está valorando la calidad de ese pescado, no se está valorando para qué vas destinado. Entonces, el sistema que a día de hoy gestiona las cuotas para nosotros es nefasto. Crear empleo debería de ser la prioridad. Y el otro, el cuidado del medio ambiente. Lo que no puede ser es que tenga prioridad matar una mosca con un cañón.
Small-scale fisheries can be part of the solution to overcome climate and marine biodiversity challenges if countries give them a fairer allocation of fishing opportunities.
The way the Irish government is handling the whole inshore fishery, it's just a mockery, 85% of the fishermen in Ireland are inshore fishermen. That's boats under 12 metres. So that 85% of them fishermen have 5% of the herring quota, and we have 1% of the Irish mackerel quota, and the rest is belong to the big boats.
Well, I'd want them to start fighting in our corner and start allocating the quotas fairly and let our boats fishing.
The heritage licence is a kind of a bill, you could say, that IIMRO, that's the Irish islands, and every time it comes up for mention the Dáil or to vote, the government turns it down. And if that bill was passed, it would help us a lot. They don't seem to care about the small families that are out there risking their lives at sea, trying to provide.
All right, thanks for that, Martha. That was excellent. I think it sums it up really well. Our next speaker, and who's going to, Isabella Loven from the Greens, is going to set the scene on Article 17, give us a summary of Article 17, including its original purpose when introduced in 2014, and outline the focus on the current state of Article 17 and its relevance today. And all I can say is, since I've gone on to the PESH Committee, and not to embarrass you, Isabel has done a phenomenal job. All I can say is I've learned a lot from you. So I'm looking forward to hearing this.
Okay, thank you so much, Luke, and welcome everyone. I'm really glad to be hosting this event together with you and other MEPs and LIFE, the Low Impact Fishers of Europe. I just want to also underline that there's interpretation for those of you that haven't, if you haven't found it. It's the channel 3 is French, 11 is Swedish, and 8 is Spanish, so no one misses that. You just find your different channels there behind you, besides you. Okay, so almost 15 years ago, I hosted a similar event here in the European Parliament. The title was, "Who should have the right to fish?" We were then in the middle of the debates which led up to the real groundbreaking reform of the common fisheries policy in 2014, where we, for the first time in legislation, in the so-called basic regulation, actually put limits on the amount of fish that could be caught legally. The total allowable catches and the fishing must be set at limits which can restore and maintain biomass levels above levels that can produce maximum sustainable yield. This is Article 2.2 in the basic regulation. This was put for the first time into law. Before that, the CFP had no clear limitations on how much fish could be caught. And every year there was a real horse trading in the Council of Ministers, leading up to fewer and fewer fish in our sea, and as a consequence, fewer and fewer fishermen, especially those that are dependent on coastal stocks, those that cannot just empty the sea in one spot and then move to the next place where they can vacuum the sea again somewhere else. So the coastal and small-scale fishermen were the immediate victims of the unsustainable common fisheries policy. And, of course, also our common sea was also a victim. So the question on how much was at the center of the reform of the common fisheries policy. But then there was another question. Who should have the right to fish? There was this idea coming from the Commission and the large-scale fishing industry at the time that the right to fish should be secured to those that had fished the most in the past, and that this right should be privatized, so that those with a lot of money on the bank could buy out their less fortunate colleagues in a system called individual tradable quotas, so-called ITQs. A system with well-known risks of concentration and giving the right to fish to a smaller and smaller number of hands or companies, stripping coastal communities of old traditions and supply of locally fished fish. But we, the Greens, we thought that this was a very, very bad idea, and so did large parts of the civil society, including the fishermen, small-scale fishermen. So why should society give those that have overfished most in the past preferential access to the stocks, even to own the stocks? And I found this in a drawer now. It's a folder that we produced 15 years ago with the title, "Who Should Have the Right to Fish?" And I thought I could maybe read a few lines from it. I think they're still valid. Marine resources are a public good, not a private resource. The right to exploit those resources, therefore, should be allocated according to criteria that ensure that fishing contributes as far as possible to the public interest. Traditionally, fishing permits have been granted those that have historical participation in the fishery. Frequently, those who have had larger catches receive the largest share of the quota. Such an approach allows those that have been most responsible for overfishing in the past to have most fishing opportunities in the future. This principle fails to contribute to stock recovery or promote sustainable fisheries and coastal communities. Some larger fishing interests have suggested establishing privatization of access to the fish stocks through systems of tradable rights, so-called ITQs. This runs contrary to the principle of fishery resources as a public good. It also leads to concentration to access to fisheries in the hands of large companies, corporations, bank and finance houses. Greens believe in other criteria. The right to fish should be based on the environmental and social aspects of the fishery. Fishermen should be required to demonstrate that their fishing operations do not damage the marine environment. So this is what also led to the Article 17. And the reason was that we wanted to see somehow that we can combine what we wanted as a society to have thriving and living coastal communities, also with the need to reduce fishing pressure and also rebuilding the stocks. This we could do with just one approach. This Article 17 tells member states, and it was adopted actually in the Common Fisheries Policy, it tells member states that they must have transparent criteria on allocation of fishing opportunities. Then it lists the criteria they may include, such as impact on the environment, history of compliance, contribution to local economies, and historic catch levels. But these are voluntary criteria that you can apply. But in the last sentence, it also says that member states shall endeavour to provide incentives to fishing vessels deploying selective fishing gear or using technique with reduced environmental impact, such as reduced energy consumption or habitat damage. And this was supported, and the article proposed by the Commission on mandatory introduction of ITQs was not supported. So it's voluntary today. So now, 12 years after the reform, we can see an improvement in the status of the fish stocks. And this is extremely important, but more needs to be done. We're not there yet. We don't have all stocks at above levels that can produce maximum sustainable yields. But on the allocation of fishing opportunities, are we taking this opportunity to meet ecological, social, and economical goals with this one approach? Sadly not. In the Baltic Sea, small-scale fishermen, one is sitting here next to me, fishing for human consumptions are still being outcompeted by large-scale trawlers that fish for fish feed for Norwegian salmon aquaculture and not for direct human consumption. And very few member states are using the criteria to push the sector to be more environmentally friendly, for instance, complying with the landing obligation, fish with static gear that are not damaging the seafloor, for example, or simply stopping giving those to don't fish for human consumption. According to STEC, the scientific body of the Commission, in 2023, only 16 member states even bothered to provide data on allocation criteria, which is really bad. And if they don't have them, it's actually breaking the law. With environmental and social criteria, we could actually kill two birds in one stone. I don't like that expression. In Swedish, we say kill two flies in one stone. But anyway, I mean, we can get the sector that we want and the ocean that we want by treating the access to fishing not as a right, but as a privilege. And I hope this discussion here will move this stone ahead to finally help us recover our ocean, but also our small-scale fishing communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. And from a time point of view, that was absolutely perfect. The next two speakers are going to be two MEPs. The first one is from the European People's Party MEP Paolo de Nascimento. I don't know, is that pronounced correctly? But you have 15 minutes maximum. Okay, thank you. Well, actually, you have 15 minutes between the two of you. Sorry, you have 7 minutes each. That's a big difference.
Thank you, Luke. First of all, to thank the invitation and for such an important event. Of course, we need to speak much more about these small-scale fisheries and these coastal communities that depends on the fisheries, and also to maintain this historic and even cultural sector in several of our regions, especially in Portugal. But I will not take 15 minutes, to not take all the time of Eric, so I will try to be very brief. Well, first of all, we need to acknowledge that one of the main issues that we are facing right now is the dependency of third countries in the importation of the fish that we consume. We are referred to be around 70% of imported fisheries consumption. So this is quite a challenge. when we have so much limitations on the fishery sector in the European Union, but especially on these local and coastal communities. This is quite important for my hometown, from Portugal, from Azores and Madeira, because we are always fighting to get more quota, fighting to make the sustainability of the activity in our islands, in our regions. And one of the things that we cannot forget is that our fisheries and our fishermen represent 0.00 something % of the total EU fishery sector. So it doesn't make sense for us to impose so many conditions, so many restrictions for these local communities. It doesn't make any sense because we are, at the end, we are reducing their possibilities to maintain a life, to create jobs, to guarantee that the people will remain in these coastal areas, in these regions. And when we need the participation of the young people, they don't care for it because they will leave the activity and we, at the end, will start to import what we consume. Another issue that we are facing right now is the prices of the fish, because one of the things that is tourism is always very welcome, but it led to an increase of the prices of the fish. And now we have some people that are in Azores and Madeira that doesn't have accessible and affordable fish to eat. And this creates a very dramatic change in our eating patterns. So it's quite challenging to understand all of these changes and the impact of the fisheries. And we always have this experience to export the best fish that we catch. So it's quite complicated balance to deal with all of that. Well, as you may already see in the presentation, Portugal, we are one of the biggest per capita consumers of fish. We have this traditional, very close link to the ocean, to the sea, to the fisheries activity. And of course, it represents thousands of jobs, thousands of euros in our economic GDP. It represents the participation in the coastal areas. It represents the fixation of population. And fortunately, we are having some good examples in this shared management, the quota management. One of the things that I truly agree with Isabella just said is the transparency in the formation of quota in the system. We need to understand why this quota was established or attributed to the fishermen, to the member states, to the regions. And I would like to stress one example that we have a good management of the quota is the blue-white tuna. For instance, the national government gives to the Portuguese, to the regional governments of Azores and Madeira, their management of this blue-white tuna. Is 85% is attributed to Azores and Madeira, and we share this competence in the allocation of this quota. It depends on, because as you know, it's a migratory species, so it depends where it appears more on Madeira or more in Azores. But it's quite important, and it was quite an achievement that we could sit down together and understand what we could fish and who will fish. So this is a good example of good management. Also, the fishermen themselves, they created a system to increase, to create some conditions for the fisheries of this blue-eye tuna. The same thing happened with red sea bream. We talked with the fishermen, and the fishermen decided that we need to increase the size of the catch of the red sea bream. And it was led by the community, not by the government or not by political decisions. They understand, so the local fishermen, the local communities, they understand what is sustainability, and they totally understand what is their survival. So it doesn't make any sense to create so much burden on these local communities. Of course, we asked every December to increase quotas, to discussions in the Agri-Fish Council. And for us, it doesn't make any sense to have every single year, every December, this dramatic field, what is going to happen next year. It's going to be cut 35% or 20%. For instance, for the Azorean red sea bream, we had this precautionary cut in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, 2022, sorry, of 20%, and now we have another proposal of 35%. So if we did nothing, we'll have to cut on 55% of quota for the local fishermen. And we explain everything. We show the data, we show everything with the scientists what we do. We show our stocks. And fortunately, the Commission set back. But imagine if we don't have this capacity. Yeah, imagine if we don't have this capacity to show to the Commission, show to the world that we have science, that we have good stock conditions. If we didn't have, we would be facing a cut of 55% in 3 years, and with an impact of more than 5 million euros in this local community. This is quite impressive. The local communities, this transparency should also be, well, we use it also in some good examples. Even in the definition of marine protected areas, we created a co-management system that promoted participation of the stakeholders that entered with their concerns, with their needs, with the things that they are going to lose, and we are now creating a system to compensate them for this definition of the marine protected areas, knowing that we need to reduce also the effort of fishing, because we cannot limit the fishing only to 70%, equal that we had in the 100%. I'll conclude in 30 seconds. Just to let you know that we are totally in line with, I will not say this regionalization of quotas, but totally in line of the participation more actively of the regional authorities on the definition of quotas. We usually see that there is some negotiations, exchanging quotas on the backs of the fishermen, and this is not acceptable. I believe that some representatives of the fishermen should be seated on the council also, or nearby their ministers, because if not, we don't understand some decisions, and this is not, nowadays it is not acceptable to have these kind of decisions on the back of the fishermen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Paolo. That was a great insight. Our next speaker is MEP Eric Sergio Como from the S&D Group to give us his perspective on Article 17. Thank you, Eric.
Merci Luc, merci beaucoup Leif, merci Paolo et Elisabetta pour leurs paroles en introduction et leur éclairage par rapport à leur expérience, notamment au Portugal et aux Açores. C'est toujours très enrichissant pour nous de voir comment ça se passe ailleurs, parce que des fois on a l'impression que ça se passe partout, comme chez soi, et visiblement ce n'est pas le cas. Il y a des bonnes choses à prendre partout. Alors c'est vrai que, comme l'a dit Elisabetta, ça fait 12 ans que cet article est dans le règlement et qu'on est en période d'évaluation de cette PCP. Et 12 ans, c'est le moment de savoir ce qui marche et ce qui ne marche pas. Et visiblement, sur cet article-là, on s'est déjà interrogé dans notre Parlement sur cet article 17. Il y a eu un rapport d'initiative de Caroline Rose, du groupe Vert, qui a été très largement, d'ailleurs, voté par le Parlement, au-delà de nos différences qu'on aime bien mettre en scène souvent dans cet hémicycle. Il y a un avis très partagé sur la façon de mettre en place cet article 17. Et on va dire globalement que ce que l'on ressent, c'est plutôt un sentiment d'échec, ou en tout cas que cet article 17 n'a pas donné tous les effets que l'on mettait en lui au moment où il a été écrit. Et je voudrais revenir sur quelques points parce que, évidemment, ce que dit l'article 17, c'est que la répartition des quotas doit se faire de manière objective et transparente. D'ailleurs, y compris la justice européenne nous l'a rappelé à travers une affaire Spica qui a rappelé justement un certain nombre de critères sur l'attribution de ces quotas de pêche. Mais ces quotas de pêche, ils doivent être transparents et objectifs et prendre en compte des caractères environnementaux, ça je pense qu'on l'a tous en tête, on en parle beaucoup sur la pêche durable, mais aussi sociaux et économiques. Vraiment reprendre le triptyque du développement durable en tant qu'élément, ce triptyque absolument fondamental. Je crois qu'on doit tous avoir à l'esprit lorsqu'on parle de pêche durable. On doit tenir compte évidemment de l'environnement, du social, mais aussi de l'économique. Peut-on rester au statu quo dans la perspective d'une future PCP, puisque je vous ai dit que ça ne marche pas, ou en tout cas ça n'a pas donné les effets escomptés, soit un article est inutile, je fais de la provocation, parce qu'il n'a pas donné d'effet, et dans ce cas-là, il faut le supprimer, soit alors il faut se donner les moyens qu'il ait un effet. Et moi, je me place plutôt, évidemment, dans cette seconde perspective. Je crois aussi que ça interroge sur le rôle des États membres et la façon dont ils gèrent. D'ailleurs, c'est très intéressant ce que tu disais, Paolo, sur la façon dont vous gérez à l'échelle du Portugal et à l'échelle des communautés régionales. Nous, on a un système en France qui est beaucoup plus centralisé, où effectivement, on attribue à l'État ces quotas. Après, ils sont répartis dans les organisations de producteurs. Et malheureusement, on va dire, on tient plus compte des historiques des bateaux que d'autres choses pour la répartition des possibilités de pêche. Et ça nous empêche de faire évoluer notre pêche côtière. Et probablement, ça rend plus difficile certaines évolutions. Je pense notamment au renouvellement des générations, qui est un élément fondamental, parce que si en fait les droits de pêche viennent dans le prix du bateau que vous devez après acheter quand vous arrivez sur le marché de la pêche, quand vous voulez devenir pêcheur, ça vous met tout de suite un impact extraordinaire sur votre investissement et ça réduit la capacité qu'ont ces nouvelles générations à rentrer sur le marché de la pêche. Donc évidemment, la façon dont est conçue aujourd'hui la répartition en France, je ne m'évertuerai pas de connaître la totalité des répartitions dans les pays de pêche, mais en tout cas en France, ça va vers plus de concentration. Alors, je ne dis pas que la concentration est toujours mauvaise parce qu'il y a un effet aussi stabilisateur des prix et notamment lorsqu'on doit déterminer des prix de retrait, c'est important qu'on ait des armements qui pèsent, mais ça se fait quand même au détriment de la petite pêche, d'une concentration et de la difficulté pour de nouveaux arrivants à arriver sur l'activité de pêche. Et surtout à un moment où la question du renouvellement des générations, comme en agriculture, en pêche, est complètement posée. Et je pense qu'il faut peser dans la prochaine PCP pour que les critères permettent de faciliter le renouvellement des générations. Ces critères sociaux aussi, c'est un marqueur du groupe SND. Je crois qu'on ne les prend pas assez en compte dans effectivement les conditions d'attribution des quotas. Il faut également prendre les conditions sociales des armements, les conditions de travail, je pense notamment les contrats des pêcheurs, et faciliter plutôt l'obtention de quotas pour les gens qui emploient des gens avec des contrats à durée indéterminée, éviter certains phénomènes d'agences de placement que l'on connaît dans un certain nombre de pays qui amène à une casse des coûts sociaux. Donc pour moi, c'est un élément extrêmement important. Je crois que tu l'as souligné, Paolo, c'était intéressant la façon dont vous gériez, mais il y a un gros problème de gouvernance. Je vous ai dit, on est un pays centralisé, la France, et pour moi, il y a un sujet, c'est la gouvernance. Et je crois à un système de gouvernance locale où on puisse avoir toutes les parties prenantes autour de la table sur un espace de gestion de la pêche. Et à partir du moment où on connaît bien la ressource, on connaît bien les armements qui sont sur cette ressource-là, je crois qu'on peut trouver un accord entre les pêcheurs, les communautés côtières, mais aussi les collectivités locales, parce que ce que je regarde, c'est qu'on s'occupe des quotas de pêche, mais derrière, il y a des collectivités locales qui investissent dans les moyens de traitement de ces pêches, dans les criées, dans les moyens de débarquement, et il faut qu'il y ait une corrélation entre ces attributions de quotas et la façon dont l'ensemble de la chaîne de la pêche est aujourd'hui organisée. Alors, pour moi, il reste quand même un point extrêmement important, l'élément clé quand même de l'organisation de la pêche, je pense que c'est les organisations de producteurs. Je souhaite qu'il y ait plus de transparence, mais il faut également que chacun comprenne l'intérêt qu'il y a à travailler avec les pêcheurs, avec les communautés côtières, avec les collectivités locales. Et je crois qu'il faut mettre un peu de pression sur les États membres, sur la façon dont ils organisent la gestion de cet article 17 et d'en respecter l'esprit. Vous savez que je viens d'un coin où il y avait un célèbre philosophe qui s'appelait Montesquieu, et il appelait toujours à l'esprit des lois. Donc j'aimerais qu'on respecte l'esprit de l'article 17.
Thank you so much, Eric, and it's good to see that our elected representatives have a really good grasp of this topic, and it's really important. Or did you want to come in there for a second, Eric?
Sorry, just a small, and sorry to take the floor again. Just to say that I just highlighted the good examples, but the rest is like yours. Like in France, the quota of other species are centralized, and we are always fighting to get a little bit more. So it's the same. I only really highlighted the 3 or 4 good examples.
Thanks for that, Paolo. Our next 3 speakers will explore the real-life challenges and the daily struggles that define small-scale fishers' livelihoods, from resource limitations to the fight for fair opportunities. And our first speaker is Gwen Panaroon, who has been a fisherman since 1983 and acquired his first boat in 1986. In 1993, he founded the Brittany Handliners Association and later became its president in 2006. He built his second boat in 1995 and joined the board of Life in 2012. Committed to mentoring the next generation, he trained 2 young deckhands through apprenticeship contracts in 2022 and 2023, eventually supporting one in acquiring their own boat. In 2025, he assumed the presidency of Life, and I'm not going to make the mistake that other people make, presuming everyone knows who Life is. Maybe everyone in this room does, but for anyone who wants to watch it afterwards, it's the low-impact fishers of Europe. So, Gwen, you have 15 minutes. You actually do have 15 minutes, unlike what I told the previous 2 speakers. So, we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Putain de houle. Ça vaut pas le coup de rester ici non plus. En plus, il n'y a pas un poisson. On essaye de représenter et on milite pour une pêche durable, pour une pêche du bar, pour que des jeunes comme Tom ou Quentin, mon autre matelot fut une époque, puissent continuer à vivre de ce métier qui est formidable. Allez, allez, allez! Allez, allez! Ça, c'est Oslo. C'est la mascotte du bateau. Il est tout le temps avec nous. Alors, il est tombé à l'eau une fois. Je préfère lui mettre un gilet, comme ça, s'il tombe et que je ne fais pas attention, j'ai une chance de le récupérer parce qu'il nage pas très bien. Oh putain! Je crois qu'on a la palangre dans les lisses. Là, c'est ce qu'on appelle la pêche à la palangre. Chaque ligne, là, fait 200 hameçons. C'est une pêche où on a un contact direct avec le poisson. Nous, quand le poisson arrive, si c'est des gros, on les sent venir d'assez loin. Enfin, il y a quelque chose qui se passe, quoi. Et au printemps, c'est encore plus facile pour nous parce qu'on pêche à la canne à pêche, on les pêche un par un. Notre association s'arrête pendant la période de reproduction. C'est sûr qu'on peut estimer que c'est sûrement une des pêches les plus durables qu'on puisse imaginer. Ouais. Tu me dis quand elle s'écarte. C'est bon? Tom, c'est un jeune homme qui a commencé avec moi, maintenant ça doit faire 3-4 ans. Et Tom pêche tout seul les 3/4 de l'année. Il n'y a que à cette époque-ci où je lui donne un coup de main parce qu'il n'a pas acquis assez d'expérience. Et en plus, c'est une pêche un peu compliquée, vous avez pu voir. Puis là, on est dans la merde. Là, par exemple, aujourd'hui, on a cassé des lignes, on a perdu un morceau. La houle s'est levée depuis hier. Il y a un endroit où on a été obligé de couper la ligne, faire le tour des cailloux, aller la chercher de l'autre côté. C'est quelque chose qui s'apprend et qu'il faut absolument transmettre. C'est pas tout de faire donner des subventions pour des bateaux neufs et tout ça, mais s'il n'y a personne à mettre sur les bateaux, ça ne sert pas à grand-chose. Et pour donner envie aux jeunes déjà d'aller dans le métier, il faut savoir transmettre, leur donner leur chance de pouvoir s'en sortir aussi bien que nous, on a pu s'en sortir. Oslo, dégage. Il aime beaucoup venir en bateau. Là, il y a tous les oiseaux autour de lui, ça l'énerve. Il n'aime pas les cormorans parce qu'en fait, il les voit disparaître sous l'eau et réapparaître et ça l'intrigue. Donc dès qu'il voit un, il est un peu énervé avec ça. Les goélands, ça va. On met des étiquettes sur les poissons pour les valoriser, pour que le client, en bout de chaîne, sache que c'est des poissons qui ont été pêchés à la ligne, au métier de l'hameçon. C'est-à-dire canne à pêche, palangre, etc. C'est une association qui est née dans les années 90 et cette association s'appelle Association Barre de Ligne Pointe de Bretagne. On a mené ce combat-là et il y a un autre poisson aujourd'hui qui nous intéresse, c'est le thon rouge qu'on retrouve beaucoup le long de nos côtes à partir de juillet et les petits bateaux comme ça ne peuvent pas aller le pêcher. Et 90% du quota est à 2 armements qui sont à 7 en Méditerranée. Ah, on a eu des bars aussi là où il y avait des lieux. Et où on aurait dû avoir des bars, on n'a pas pêché un. On voit bien par exemple que la taille des poissons diminue, qu'il y en a moins. Ça c'est un constat qu'aujourd'hui personne ne peut contester. Le problème, c'est que nous, la ressource ne dépend pas que de nous, malheureusement. Et quand on voit ces gros chalutiers en Manche avec des capacités de capture monstrueuses, même s'ils ne ciblent pas les mêmes espèces que nous, on voit bien qu'avec des filets de cette taille-là, tout passe dedans. Donc beaucoup de choses se passent au niveau de l'Europe. Et si on se contente de se défendre localement, ça ne sert à rien. Il m'arrive d'aller à Bruxelles, rencontrer des parlementaires, des commissaires européens, pour leur expliquer qu'est-ce que la petite pêche, quelles sont nos attentes aujourd'hui et surtout quelles sont nos craintes. C'est des gens qui ont affaire surtout au lobbyisme des grands bateaux. Les petits bateaux, pour eux, à la limite, ils ne savent même pas que ça existe, quoi. Ça fait peut-être partie d'une carte postale, mais derrière les bateaux qui sont dans les ports, ils ne voient pas une petite flottille comme ça qui est répartie tout le long de la côte européenne. Je crois qu'en nombre de bateaux, la petite pêche, alors c'est moins de 12 mètres là pour le coup, représente 80% des bateaux. En bonhomme, ça représente la moitié, et en chiffre d'affaires, ça s'est complètement inversé, c'est 80% de chiffre d'affaires est fait par les gros bateaux. Je crois que la pêche, d'abord, c'est un métier de passion. Il ne faut pas croire que même si certains gagnent bien leur vie, si on n'a pas la mer comme ça dans la peau, je crois que ça ne marche pas en fait. On arrive où? On arrive.
Mesdames, Messieurs, nous sommes aussi aujourd'hui au cœur du Parlement européen, aux côtés de pêcheurs dont je fais partie, venus de 5 pays de l'Union européenne, de députés, d'acteurs clés du secteur, pour défendre un principe simple mais essentiel, l'accès équitable aux ressources et à la reconnaissance de la petite pêche. Nous représentons cette flottille oubliée, celle qui pratique une pêche durable, qui valorise ses produits sur les marchés locaux, régionaux, et qui pourtant est systématiquement mise de côté dans l'attribution des quotas. Prenons un exemple emblématique, le thon rouge. Pour avoir les... Voilà. Donc sur ce graphique, on voit très bien qu'en 2017, l'attribution du quota de thon rouge représentait 86% pour les gros bateaux, et donc il reste effectivement 13 plus 1, 14% pour les autres. Donc 8 ans plus tard, en 2025, le diapo, s'il vous plaît. Voilà, en 2025, vous voyez que malgré les 2000 tonnes supplémentaires de thon attribuées, parce que c'est une ressource qui va plutôt très très bien, eh ben la part a même plutôt augmenté pour les gros bateaux. Donc on voit bien qu'il y a un échec complet de l'article 17, au moins sur cette pêcherie-là. Donc prenons un exemple emblématique, le thon rouge. Grâce aux efforts collectifs de conservation, ces stocks se sont largement reconstitués. C'est une victoire environnementale. Pourtant, au lieu de permettre aux petits pêcheurs d'en bénéficier, les quotas restent captés par des grandes entreprises qui exportent presque toute leur pêche vers le marché japonais. Nous n'avons droit à quelques miettes. Un seul poisson pêché à la ligne, bien valorisé, soit en restauration ou en poissonnerie, peut représenter financièrement une semaine de chiffre d'affaires. C'est pourquoi nous avons engagé une procédure contre l'État français en 2017, parce que nous refusons de nous laisser effacer, parce que nous avons le droit d'exister et de vivre dignement de notre métier. En 2021, le tribunal de Toulouse rend un premier jugement qui nous est favorable. L'État fait appel. En 2024, l'État perd de nouveau en appel et ce pouvoir en cassation. L'exemple du lieu jaune est tout aussi frappant. L'espèce est aujourd'hui au bord de l'effondrement. Autrefois pêché majoritairement par des petits pêcheurs, il est aujourd'hui sous pression de gros fileyeurs, les ciblant en période de reproduction, à des prix très bas. Bien qu'ayant proposé des solutions, augmentation de la taille à 42 et pêche interdite pendant la période de frai, le massacre hivernal continue. Résultat, ceux qui pratiquent cette pêche raisonnée et durable voient leur opportunité s'effondrer, tandis que l'industrie continue d'exploiter la ressource sans considération pour l'avenir. Nous ne demandons pas un privilège, mais l'application d'un droit déjà inscrit dans la réglementation européenne. L'article 17 de la politique commune des pêches, la PCP, exige qu'aujourd'hui les États membres attribuent les quotas de pêche en tenant compte de critères sociaux, environnementaux et économiques. Or, la France, comme ailleurs, cet article reste une lettre morte. Ce sont toujours les grandes flottilles industrielles qui dominent, tandis que les communautés côtières sont laissées pour compte. Une réglementation qui existe mais qui n'est pas appliquée. Comment justifier une telle injustice? C'est pourquoi cette réunion est si importante. Nous sommes ici alors que l'Union européenne met une consultation publique sur la PCP pour exiger des actes concrets. Nous demandons que l'article 17 soit réellement mis en œuvre, avec un plan contraignant afin que la petite pêche ait enfin accès aux ressources de manière équitable. Mais il ne s'agit pas seulement d'aujourd'hui, il s'agit aussi du futur. Car pour qu'il y ait des pêcheurs demain, il faut que les jeunes puissent s'installer. Et pour pêcher, il faut un bateau et il faut du poisson. Aujourd'hui, les jeunes qui veulent prendre le métier sont confrontés à un double mur. Les quotas sont monopolisés par les grandes entreprises, empêchant toute nouvelle installation. Les bateaux coûtent de plus en plus cher et sans accès à ces quotas, ils ne sont pas rentables. Comment encourager une nouvelle génération à reprendre le flambeau si l'accès à la ressource est bloqué et si la petite pêche n'a plus de place dans la politique européenne? Si nous ne changeons rien, nous assisterons à la disparition progressive des petits métiers, des savoir-faire traditionnels et de toute une culture maritime qui fait partie de notre identité. Agir pour sauver la petite pêche. Mais pourquoi sommes-nous toujours exclus des décisions? Parce que nous, petits pêcheurs, nous ne sommes pas représentés dans les instances où ces décisions se prennent. Les organisations de producteurs, les comités des pêches, ces lieux où se distribuent les quotas, où se façonne l'avenir de la profession, sont dominés par les grands acteurs de la profession. Nous sommes absents des discussions, absents des décisions. Aujourd'hui, devant vous, nous demandons l'application réelle et contraignante de l'article 17 de la PCP, avec des critères sociaux, environnementaux et l'attribution des quotas. Une répartition équitable des quotas qui prennent en compte ceux qui vivent réellement de la pêche durable et locale. Une place légitime à la table des négociations afin que notre voix ne soit plus ignorée. Des mesures pour assurer l'installation de jeunes pêcheurs en garantissant accès aux ressources et des conditions viables pour la petite pêche. La petite pêche doit continuer d'exister. Derrière ces mots, il y a des hommes qui à travers tous les jours, à travers leur métier, font vivre des milliers de personnes tout au long du littoral européen. On dit qu'un emploi en mer, c'est 4 emplois à terre. Ce sont des chantiers navals, des mécaniciens, des coopératives qui disparaîtront si la petite pêche se meurt. Ce sont des kilomètres de côtes qui se videront de toute vie maritime au détriment des stations balnéaires, trop peuplées l'été et mortes l'hiver. L'avenir de la petite pêche ne peut être sacrifié au profit d'industriels. Un modèle de pêche durable ne peut être construit sans eux qui, depuis toujours, pratiquent la petite pêche responsable. Merci.
Thank you very much, Gwen. That was very familiar from what I've been hearing in the last year, but it's really, really good to hear it and good to get your insight. And thanks for being on time. I appreciate that. Our next speaker, looking at the same, exploring real-life challenges and the daily struggles of small-scale fishers, is Seamus Bonner. And I'm more familiar with Seamus because I meet him on a regular basis. Seamus is Secretary of the Irish Islands Marine Resource Organisation, a small-scale fisheries producer organisation based on the offshore islands of Ireland. Seamus has extensive experience in community development and the delivery of national and EU programmes across the Irish Islands. He is Director of the Low Impact Fishers of Europe, LIFE, a pan-European representative organisations for 36 members groups representing 10,000 small-scale fishers across Europe. And I'll let you go now. You have 15 minutes as well, and we'd be interested to hear what you have to say. Thank you, Seamus.
Thank you, Chair. And just to thank the organisers for the invitation to discuss Article 17 today in the Parliament. I think it's very important. I suppose to give some context, the Chair mentioned some of the background, but we're a small-scale producer organisation based on the offshore islands of Ireland, very small communities spread across the west coast. Some of our members featured in the video there at the beginning of the session. So the communities that we represent are very dependent on fishing, and Irish island boats make up 6% of the Irish national fleet, so it gives you an idea of the degree of dependency. Could I just get the next slide, please? Yeah. They are quite remote with small piers and harbours, and fish from small boats with crews typically of 1 to 3 people. The boats are small, and the kind of average size is around 8 metres. They're really dependent on non-quota fish stocks, such as shellfish like crab and lobster. So that would be the kind of background. Could I get the next slide as well, please? That's just another gives you an idea of the size of the boats that our members fish from, and using pots and traps offshore. So could I get the next slide as well, please? Our work, typically we work at different levels, so we would work regionally at a county level, nationally at an Irish government level, and at EU level as well. Our typical focus at the minute is we're trying to develop some onshore infrastructure to help our members in the day-to-day operations. So we're trying to get basic services on the piers and harbours like power, light, and water, so basic things like that. So to support decarbonisation, for example, short supply chains and things like that. We've been involved in a couple of national initiatives as well. One would be, it was mentioned in the video, of the Irish Islands Heritage Licence Bill. And what that involves is it's a small proportion of quotas ring-fenced to facilitate traditional seasonal practices and within the 6-mile limit. And it kind of complements the work of LIFE at the moment, who are working to prioritise low-impact fisheries within the 12-mile nautical limit. We've also did some international work. We partnered with a non-profit from South Africa called Abalobi, who are developing, along with fishermen in Ireland, on the islands, and in South Africa as well, and other places, a catch recording app and a direct sales channel. So you have traceable seafood. And just a couple of other examples of our work. We're involved in a digitisation project, an EU Horizon project on vessel and gear trackers, which is kind of essential for marine spatial planning, and we're working on that at the moment. It's a project that's underway. Finally, there's a lot of mention, I think, from the speakers before about the culture and heritage of fisheries and how it's kind of entwined in the communities that people are there. So we have done some work to get some of these practices recognised through UNESCO, and the navigation ways of Irish island fishermen is part of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Inventory of Ireland. Could I get the next slide, please? Just going back to the Article 17 focus, I just want to speak today about generational renewal, and to emphasise that the situation, it really is urgent. The small-scale fisheries make up the majority of the fleet. In Ireland, 88% of the fleet is under 12 metres, and we need to incentivise the young people to come into the fishing community using targeted measures, which includes access to the fishery resource. The problems have been mentioned a good few times, in that young people can't get established in fisheries at the moment. One of the main reasons is the use of track record as a way of allocating the fishery resource. And this kind of excludes new entrants. So anybody new coming along without a track record finds it very hard to get access to the fishery resource. Those pictures that you see, and our members are, it's a family from Ironmore called the Kavanaghs. They've between them, the four of those in the picture there, they've got about 100 years of experience on the water. Neely, who's Moran's father, started fishing when he was 11, so he's got over 40 years of experience. And that knowledge is not just himself, it's intergenerational. It's been passed from his father and his grandfather, and he's now passing it on to Moran. So that kind of, I suppose, shows the importance of that linkage and keeping that within the community and making it possible for people like Moran to start fishing. Could I get the next slide, please? So Moran is she's a determined young woman. She's 15, and she fishes with her uncle during the summer months. Up until now, she's been fishing pollock using a hand line, which is the photo on the top right. These are very basic tools that haven't changed really for hundreds of years. The picture there is one from the National Museum of Ireland from 1928, from one of the Galway Islands. So unfortunately, because of zero TAC advice from ICES, there was a closure in the fishery for the last couple of years, and Moran has kind of taken to highlighting it at national and European level. She's been to the Parliament in Strasbourg and Brussels, and she's highlighting it. I suppose the point we want to make is, you know, a year later after her visiting the Parliament, nothing really much has changed. The handline pollock continues to be closed, and there's a bycatch fishery which continues for the industrial scale. So I think the shortcomings in that system needs to be urgently addressed so that people like Moran, who are fishing in a sustainable way, using low impact methods, are allowed to continue to fish. Could I get the next slide, please? So at IIMRO, we're always complaining, but we also like to come up with solutions and some suggestions. I think we need to try a new approach to make sure that Article 17 is implemented. There is a disconnect between the theory and the practice, so the aims of the Article 17 are clear. It's in the regulation. There's shall in the wording, but the experience on the ground doesn't match the reporting of the implementation, and I think that needs to be looked at. Some of the suggestions we're proposing, and we'd be happy through LIFE and the other organisations to discuss these with the MEPs, is to remove track record as the main mechanism to access the fishery resource. End any vetoes to change, so that applies at all levels, whether it's member state level or EU level. Give a ring fence quota for low impact fisheries, and that's got a lot of benefits. It'll strengthen communities, incentivise new entrants, it's environmentally sustainable, and it'll strengthen resilience and food security. And just standardise it across the EU as well, because there's a lot of differences in the way things are interpreted at different member state level. I think as well we need to get some binding guidelines from the commissions, from member states, in the form of a staff guidance document, and clear public reporting requirements for the transparency to be delivered. In June 2022, there was a resolution adopted on Article 17 in the Parliament, and I think it's a template for action. I think we should start now immediately, really, to deliver the changes proposed in that resolution. And just finally, I would call from IIMRO to make these changes happen within this Parliament term. The text on the photo there is from the Common Fisheries Policy from from 2012 as well. But again, it hasn't been delivered for the offshore islands, and I'd like to see the same done for Article 17. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you very much, Seamus, and thanks for what you're after saying. And for me, I've dealt with IIMRO for quite a while, and I deal with a lot of groups in the European Parliament. Obviously, as MEPs, a lot of people come to us, but organised and well thought out, and every I that needs to be dotted and every T that needs to be crossed is done. And still they find the system impossible to deal with. So to me, that suggests that the organisations that we're talking today don't really need to change. Things need to change out here, and things need to change in people's countries. So thanks for that, Seamus. So the last of our three speakers who are going exploring the real-life challenges and the daily struggles of small-scale fishers is Bengt Larsson, Life Director and Board Member of, and I'm going to try and pronounce this, Sveriges Yrkesfiskares Ekonomiska Förening, which is probably totally incorrect, but to give you the acronym for it, it's the SYEF. It represents small-scale fishers in Sweden. At the national level, he advocates for the organisation in discussions with SWAM, the Swedish Marine Agency, that was an easier one, and the local county board. Additionally, Bengt serves as the spokesperson for the organisation in the Baltic Sea Advisory Council, the BSAC, and is a board member of LIFE. Bengt, I look forward to what you have to say, Bengt. Okay, thank you very much.
Ja, tack så mycket för att jag har fått komma hit och för den här chansen att tala och för inbjudan. Som sagt, jag heter Bengt Larsson och jag är småskalig yrkesfiskare från Sverige och jag bedriver mitt fiske i södra Östersjön. Jag har då blivit ombedd att göra mitt inlägg från ett personligt perspektiv hur det är att vara yrkesfiskare, småskalig yrkesfiskare i Sverige och i Östersjön. Och det handlar ju många gånger om att vi som är den småskaliga sektorn, vi är ju faktiskt med redan när vi är små barn och lär oss. Och jag tror inte den här lilla grabben kunde föreställa sig att han skulle prata för parlamentariker i EU drygt 60 år senare här. Sen vet jag inte vem som är mest rädd, om det är jag eller gäddan. Nästa bild. Next slide, please. Ja. Det här är mina fartyg jag använder. Den blå är en stålbåt på 35 fot, ungefär cirka 10,5 meter. Och den fiskar jag med ute på öppet hav. Den lilla båten med orange kant eller reling är en öppen båt på 6 meter och med den bedriver jag fiske inomskärs. Och varför jag har den nu också vill jag återkomma till lite. Och jag är då hissar stolt Lifes flagga i masten också när jag är ute på sjön för att visa vad vi stöttar för någonting. Jag har i alla år bedrivit fiske ute till havs med den blå båten, men har de senaste åren behövt inrikta mitt fiske mestadels inomskärs istället. Och orsaken till detta är faktiskt det fiskeförbud som kom i Östersjön tack vare att vi har fått svaga bestånd. Och det som kom till först, det var 2012, då fick vi sluta fiska lax. Och 2019 så var det stora dråpslaget, så då var det torskfisket som förbjöds. Och det var ungefär 10 år för sent. För kollapsen kom redan 10 år tidigare, enligt vår åsikt. Så det enda fisket som jag nu har möjlighet att utöva nu är ute till havs, det är fiske efter plattfisk. Exempelvis piggvar, flundra och rödspätta. Men även där har det då införts stora restriktioner för fisket med passiva redskap på 3 stora geografiska områden. Men det är, jag ska inte säga tragiskt där, men orsaken är olika, men det är fortfarande trålfiske för fortsatt tillträde på de områdena. Som ni hör så fiskar jag både ute till havs men också inomskärs. Och allt då beroende på säsong och tillgång. Som ordförande sa innan här så representerar jag då en organisation som företräder småskaligt och kustnära yrkesfiske. Vår organisation är då också medlemmar i LIFE, Low Impact Fishers of Europe. Och där vi då har en plats i dess styrelse. Personligen så började jag engagera mig rejält i fiskefrågor i mitten av 1990-talet. Alla trodde att det här fisket som vi bedrev, det skulle vara så. Vi var nästan nöjda med hur fisket bedrevs. Vi hade våra inkomster och det funkade rätt så bra. Men vi såg samtidigt trender på att bestånden började vika. Huvudsäsongen var på vintern från januari till slutet av mars. Och för varje år så kortades säsongen in med en halv månad. Så till slut så hade vi bara en halv månad efter nyår som var bra. Sen var det inget bra fiske längre. Och jag stod på kajen då och höll mitt första så kallade brandtal för mina kollegor redan 1996. Och förklarade att om vi fortsätter fiska så här hårt så kommer vi få se en kollaps inom de närmaste åren. Kollegorna idiotförklarade mig och tyckte att jag var inte vid rätt mentalt tillstånd. Och jag har väl blivit lite av svarta fåret inom fisket också som säger emot och kommer med uttalanden och försöker förklara att det här går inte längre. Och det är inte populärt ska ni veta inom fisket också, även om många tillhör den småskaliga sektorn. Men framförallt de stora då så är jag nageln i ögat. Och då bestämde jag mig för att jag ska kämpa så hårt jag någonsin kan. Så inte mina barnbarn kommer och fråga varför gjorde ni ingenting. Så att jag ska kunna se dem i ögonen och säga att jag har i alla fall gjort vad vi kan och vi har gjort vad vi har kunnat för att försöka vända den här trenden. Och som sagt, som Isabella här sa innan så hade vi då ett event, vem har rätten att få fiska? Och jag kommer så mycket väl ihåg det när vi var här. Och jag ska väl säga egentligen, ärligt talat så har det inte hänt någonting sedan den dagen. Och det är ju tragiskt egentligen att det är på det viset. Men som sagt, vi fortsätter att kämpa. Den presentationen jag nu kommer att göra det i kronologisk ordning för att ni bättre ska förstå mitt perspektiv som småskalig yrkesfiskare. Jag ska också försöka ge mitt perspektiv hur orättvist det småskaliga fisket har blivit åsidosatt över tid. Och även förmedla vår åsikt hur det skulle kunna bli mer rättvist. Nästa bild. Så. Småskaligt kustnära fiske har historiskt varit en självklar rättighet för kustbefolkningen. Det har ju både Chemus här och Gwen talat om innan. Att det är någonting som egentligen ska bara höra till kustsamhällena. Det har varit en självklar rättighet för kustbefolkningen och fisket med låg påverkan på fiskbestånd och miljö har kunnat fortgå med goda resultat under årtionden, sekler, ja till och med årtusenden. Så vad är det då som har kullkastat detta nästan till perfekta sättet att fiska och har lett fram till den här situationen som råder nu? Next slide, please. One more. Jo, de senaste 40 årens misslyckade fiskeriförvaltning, jag vill säga. Trots att vi småskaliga fiskare har påtalat den katastrofala förvaltning så har den pågått om och om igen. Så vi inom den småskaliga sektorn har många gånger inte ens blivit tillfrågade och bidra med vår kompetens som vi har. I stort sett alla beslut och åtgärder har premierat det storskaliga fisket och istället missgynnat det småskaliga fisket. Next slide. Så det har ju faktiskt beslutats om alldeles för höga kvoter i alla år. Och detta har gjort att fångstuttagen då har blivit oproportionerligt stora. Men det har i sin tur då gett oss minskade fiskbestånd som då i sin tur har påverkat hela ekosystemet. Jag kan informera er om att fisket bedrivs ju totalt vansinnigt. Man använder inte resurser på ett sätt som skulle kunna vara väldigt bra i dessa tider. Dels för att vi behöver ha högre självförsörjningsgrad i våra länder och dels för att vi ska kunna bete oss på ett sätt så att vi använder resursen så att alla får nyttan av den, även de som bor eller lever under vattenytan. Det har då gett oss minskade fiskbestånd som har påverkat hela ekosystemet. 95% av all sill och skarpsill i Östersjön mals ner till foder och skickas till norska fiskodlingar, laxodlingar, som sedan i sin tur vi köper lax av dem och äter. Istället för att vi får fiska laxen eller att laxen i Östersjön ska få ha maten istället för att äta den. Och den här fisken skulle kunna göra enorm nytta då till alla som mat istället i ekosystemet. Next. Den här har jag blivit ombedd att visa. Man säger i Sverige på allmän begäran, men det är det kanske inte. Men jag vet vissa som sitter i församlingen som har bett mig att visa denna. Och det handlar faktiskt om vad är då balans i systemet. Jo, det viktigaste är balansen mellan de olika fiskbestånden. Och det finns ju de som behöver andra fiskar som föda. Och det är ju samma sak med oss människor också. Jag brukar illustrera detta med två bilder här och det kan tyckas självklart. För till oss själva så måste vi ha mat i kylskåpet och i frysen och i frysboxen. Och bilden visar klart och tydligt liksom att när det fanns stora torskar och vi hade bra med sill och skarpsill i havet, då kunde man få fina fångster. Den här bilden är från 1975, den väger 20 kilo den torsken, den tog jag med handlina. Och vi fick hela tiden, varje år på den tiden, jättestor torsk. Och det var inget snack om utan att bestånden var i balans. Men vad händer då om det inte är någon mat i frysen? Då tar vi nästa bild. Next slide, please. Ja, då händer det precis som det visar där. Har vi fiskat av hela bestånden med den fisken som ska vara mat till de stora torskarna så blir det ingen mat till dem. Och då är ekosystemet i balans. Next slide, please. Vilka åtgärder är då viktigast för att fiskeriförvaltningen ska bli mer rättvis? Ja, vi pratar ju då om artikel 17. Och den har egentligen inte vi märkt av inom det småskaliga fisket. Den är en villfarelse, eller man ibland skojar med att det är som den heliga ande. Alla talar om det men ingen har sett den. Och om vi har fattat det rätt så ska artikel 17 uppmuntra till positiva regleringar som stödjer hållbara fiskemetoder och därmed mer socioekonomisk hållbarhet. Utvecklingen har blivit precis tvärtom. Det är viktigt att det här blir implementerat så att det följs av medlemsstaterna, att det är tvingande. För annars händer det ingenting. Vi har vår erfarenhet i Sverige så är det ju det att den statliga Marine Agency gör precis vad de vill egentligen. Det är för stort tolkningsutrymme. Och vad skulle man då kunna göra egentligen rent fiskeripolitiskt? Jo, i det korta perspektivet naturligtvis lägre kvoter då. För att framförallt då på sill och skarpsill i vårt fall i Östersjön. Det skulle göra rejäla effekter för den sill som lever ute till havs och vandrar in till kusterna vår och höst där det småskaliga fisket bedrivs. Det hade varit en sorts rättvisa. Och då ger fiske med låg påverkan företräde till fisket och i geografiska områden. En sak som är väldigt kontroversiell men som de flesta fiskare som är betydligt äldre än vad jag är, om man intervjuar dem och frågar dem vad skulle man göra egentligen för att det här skulle bli ett bättre fiske, reducerar maskinstyrkan, fartygen, då börjar vi konkurrera på rättvisa premisser. Då kan man inte ha så här stora redskap som är 200 meter i bredd och 70 meter höga, där ingen fisk har en aning om att den simmar in i det redskapet innan det är för sent. Inga däggdjur heller för den delen. Så, och även då en inkluderande ekosystembaserad förvaltning som tar hänsyn till alla arter och dess samband. Och sen en annan sak som är otroligt viktig faktiskt i det här sammanhanget, det är det att en omfördelning av så kallade subsidies som skulle göra stor nytta i ett långsiktigt perspektiv, det vore att satsa på ekonomiskt stöd för forskning till de som fiskar småskaligt. För flera av oss som bedriver fiske med låg påverkan samarbetar redan nu med forskare från Sverige, Danmark, Tyskland, Polen och flera än den. Och det görs för att förstå sambanden i det marina ekosystemet. Man har alltid sagt att ja, så här är det. Ja, okej, men varför är det så här? Och vad är det som påverkar det? Och vad påverkar det från olika håll? Vi samarbetar också med att utveckla alternativa redskap som kan skydda fångsten mot stora problem och skador som orsakar av säl och skarv. Här är det viktigt att det finns rejäla ekonomiska incitament. Det småskaliga fisket dras med dålig lönsamhet och ett samarbete med forskning som har ekonomisk stöttning skulle ge en extra boost i verksamheten samtidigt som viktig kompetens inte går förlorad. Det är otroligt positivt för vår del att vi kan föra de här diskussionerna och ha det här samarbetet mellan våra olika fiskeorganisationer i Europa. Och LIFE har gett oss en fantastisk möjlighet att göra detta. Och samtidigt då att vi har möjlighet att få tala med parlamentariker och föra den diskussionen framåt så vi kan gå några framgångar till mötes. Vill du ha den sista bilden? Last slide please. Det här är de alternativa redskapen vi är lite efter här. Det är bilder från när vi har provfiskat och utvecklat burar till fiskat torsk som är skyddade från sälen. Och den bilden till höger är en ny sorts redskap som vi har utvecklat tillsammans med Sveriges lantbruksuniversitet, SLU Aqua. Och det är ett så kallad pontonfälla, ponton trap, där själva huset är gjort av en material som är jättestarkt så inte sälen kan komma åt det. Next slide. Ni som tittade och såg den allra första bilden tänkte kanske inte på att det var en gryning på den bilden. Och det här är faktiskt ingen solnedgång utan det är faktiskt en soluppgång. Och därför får det symbolisera att vi fortfarande ser framåt med stolthet med vårt yrke. Tack ska ni ha.
Thank you very, very much, Bengt. That was a phenomenal insight, and it brings up that issue. I'm also a member of the Agriculture Committee, where on one hand we talk about there won't be enough food for the people in Europe, and then at the same time we feed animals that we subsequently eat with protein that has the proper range of amino acids to give us perfect protein. So to me, really, if a lot of these people were honest, it isn't a case that Europe can't feed itself proteins, it's that some people just want the exact protein from the exact fish that they want any time of the year, and really it isn't about not having enough food. It's about people want to pamper themselves to the point that there's nothing left for anyone at the end of the day. So, Bengt, that was, I came here to learn. I learned a lot from what you said there. So thank you very much. So that's the end of our three speakers exploring the real-life challenges and the daily struggles of small-scale fishers. For the next 20 minutes, we're going to get an update from the European Commission, DG MARE, and I just want to thank Owen McA, Deputy Head of Unit of the CFP and Structural Support Policy Development Coordination of MARE D3, for coming here today. and I've heard him speak previously at the PESH committee, and it was very, very interesting, and it'll be good to hear what you have to say today, and we'll have a few questions afterwards. So, Owen, thanks a million for coming here today.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the speakers. I heard some very, very interesting examples, very enlightening discussion. It's really nice to bring these examples of what works in Madeira and how the local conditions are in different fisheries across the EU. I think time and time again, the message that comes across to me is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. There are very different local contexts, and there are very different local fisheries, and same goes in the legislation. It's very different. It's very difficult to have a one-size-fits-all approach in a couple of lines of legal text in Article 17. So the Commission recognises the role that small-scale fisheries play in the EU, and we're very much aware of the difficulties, as were set out here, that small-scale fishers are facing. They're a very important part of the culture and of the tradition in fisheries. They give a very important support to local communities. There were several references to jobs and employment. They're smaller. It's harder to access quota. It's harder to access finance. These are all things that we've heard before, and it's the reason why we try to promote or give as much preferential access as possible in several areas. So, for example, in access to waters, where member states can give preferential access for small-scale within their 12-mile nautical zones. Other examples are exemptions under the new control regulation, promoting participation through the advisory councils and having voices heard like that, and in the funding instruments that we have. In the current MFAF, which runs from 21 to 27, projects related to small-scale coastal fisheries are eligible for up to 100% public aid. That's up from 60 or 70% in the previous fund. So we've seen that they need more support, and we try to offer like that. Of the uptake of funding, about 1/3 of the funding goes to small-scale related operations. And as part of their 7-year funding programme, member states need to give specific consideration to small scale and develop an action plan and set out how they're going to support the small scale. There was a reference just now from our last speaker about participating in research projects, for example, and we fully support that. We want to have those partnerships to grow between fishermen or fishers and research, for example, to help develop innovative gears that you were speaking about. And they're projects or operations that can qualify for that high rate of public support, so it can be very beneficial as well for the fishers. But as we've heard, there are still challenges to be addressed, and I would like to encourage you to keep on speaking about these challenges, keep making the point, especially in the context of the ongoing evaluation of the Common Fisheries Policy. The public consultation runs until 21st of April, and as with all of our consultations, it's really important to underpin your point of view with the evidence that you've shown here today. That's what gives us the momentum to look at our policy and how it's performing, evaluate. There were references also from speakers about a review of the Common Fisheries Policy. I want to be clear that what's happening at the moment is an evaluation of the Common Fisheries Policy. We have our approach is that we evaluate first, see how the situation is, and then take action, appropriate action as necessary. So very important, please, to make these points through the public consultations. Rightly so, one of the most repeated claims of small-scale fisheries is the difficulties they face in accessing fishing opportunities linked to Article 17. Article 17, as we've heard many times, requires member states to use transparent and objective criteria, including those of an environmental, social and economic nature. So it's within that framework, or within that limit, that member states have the margin of discretion when choosing and designing the systems and the allocation methods. and they can adapt them to their specific needs. And we heard very well in the case of the Azores how that works in that context. The reason it's done like that is that national authorities are the ones who have the best understanding of the local situation. On this topic, on methods and systems for allocation, the legislation as it is, it doesn't give a specific role to the Commission. It's clear that the Member States must apply Article 17, and the Commission maintains direct contact with the Member States and has asked on several occasions. We've sent questionnaires, I'll come to that in a second, on how they're addressing the requirements of Article 17 so that we can build our knowledge for coming with a vademecum. The idea for the vademecum, I think, was first announced in the report in 2023 on the functioning of the Common Fisheries Policy in February, that we would go to the STECF and analyse the criteria used by Member States. So we've had a follow-up. I think we've had 2 follow-ups with Member States since then on questionnaires, on analysing what STECF has analysed them, and now we're digesting that. And the Commissioner more recently announced that we would come with a vademecum by the end of this year. The replies that we've had from Member States, I think that's interesting for you. They reveal 2 main messages. First, there's a very large diversity in how Member States apply Article 17. And second, that there is a need for further discussion and debate like we have here today. I heard references to putting pressure on Member States, on authorities, making it known how it's done in one Member State, in one region or locality, and how those good examples can be spread. But we have to be conscious that what works in one situation might not work in another situation. We found big divergence on the way Member States approach transparency, what that means to Member States, and what it means to have stakeholders' involvement. Just quoting STECF, the scientific committee that assessed the questionnaires, they found difficulties assessing transparency due to, among other things, the lack of a baseline. In other words, what a standard definition of what transparency is and how it's implemented. So transparency can range, for example, from publication in an official journal of the member state or on a website to just a simple low-key reporting to the interested stakeholders. It can be in the transparent publication of the outcomes, or it can be in the provision of detailed information on the methodology, on the how, on the why, and where the quota goes. There's a big range. The main challenges mentioned by the member states, I'll just give you a flavour of them, but please bear in mind that we're not, at this point, we're not endorsing those challenges. I'm just simply quoting from what STECF has said. We're in the process now of digesting that and taking the evidence that we get from the public consultations and from forums like this where we're hearing the discussion. So some of the ideas were the inertia of old systems that have been in place for a long time, that were established well before Article 17 was included in the Common Fisheries Policy, and that, from the point of view of member states, that changing that would affect the stability of the fleets that are exploiting the resources. There's a complexity in changing the current process or the allocation key. Some member states reported that the current allocation systems are a result of complex discussions and negotiations that had gone on for several years with stakeholder engagement and agreements at their level, and that changing the rules would to reopen these discussions, and that it wasn't the right time to do this. There is no specific mention of small-scale fisheries in Article 17. So Article 17 encourages member states to incentivise deploying selective fishing gear or using fishing techniques with reduced environmental impact. It is true that small-scale and low-impact fisheries can fulfil these requirements, but we can't generalise the equation that small-scale fisheries is inherently equals low-impact fishing, and by contrast that large-scale or industrial fishing equals high impact. So there isn't a specific mention of small-scale in Article 17, and Member States therefore have the discretion to choose criteria according to the situation on the ground in the Member States. So I mentioned earlier it's difficult to find a one-size-fits-all solution given the differences in the specific needs from the Member States, geographical areas even within the Member State. So given the challenges I set out just there, I think it's important to have realistic expectations on what can be delivered in the context of a vademecum. I heard references from the speakers to ring-fenced quota, binding guidance, clear public reporting requirements. This doesn't fit in the current legislative framework. There isn't a role there to give that binding guidance and binding or clear reporting requirements. It is at the discretion of the Member States. So with the vademecum, we'll aim to invite Member States to reflect on the systems and on the methods they're currently using for allocating their fishing opportunities, and encourage them to better design and better align those systems, learn from the lessons that we have from other Member States and other regions, and give the necessary considerations to the requirements that are expressed in Article 17. So we very much understand the diversity of small-scale fisheries and the importance to the economy. Small micro-enterprises supporting families, supporting local economies. And as I've set out through the fund and through the policy, we try to give preferential support for small-scale where we can. And the transparency of the criteria is something that is for Member States to define. So we are committed to driving improvements in that process, and that's why we're working with STEC, with the Member States, with stakeholders through the advisory councils in particular. And in as much as the legislation allows, we will come with more information on this in the form of the vademecum in as much as the legislation allows. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Owen, for all you've said there. And we're now coming on to a question and answers discussion. We only got about 15 to 20 minutes to do it. We've had questions from a few people already. We want to go through them first. We have a question from, if they're here, Jeremy Percy, the Life Senior Advisor. Are they here?
Yep.
Yeah. We have to, if you want to go through the question yourself. Okay.
Yep. Thank you very much. Firstly, thanks for the invite. Secondly, with the greatest respect to the man from the Commission, I was like Mrs. Lovin here in 2014, producing documents, and I have to admit to a level of frustration that here we are over 12 years later, that the small-scale fleet is going backwards, not forwards. From a UK perspective, we've lost 25% of our inshore fleet since 2014. And I quite take your point about the fact that there is no explicit mention of small scale in Article 17, but we are, as ever, prepared to take our chances with it. But following decades under the common fishery policy, many fisheries vital to small-scale fishers are now in crisis, simply no fish. What concrete solutions do you propose to restore fish stocks, protect fisheries and support those that rely upon them? And can we expect finally a binding implementation plan by both the Commission and Member States? Thank you.
Owen, I guess that's for you. I've got about 2 minutes if you can do it in that.
The difficulty, thank you for the question. The difficulty really there is in what the legislative framework allows us to do. We get on to Member States, we ask them to reply to our questionnaires, but at the end of the day, it is for them to decide what allocation criteria they use. They can be transparent they publish information behind the allocation criteria, or they publish how the quota has been allocated. But the exact binding guidance on how that transparency can be. We don't have the necessary legal framework to put that in place. So what was the last part of your question? Was about...
It was certainly when we could expect some sort of binding implementation plan.
Yeah, so on the binding implementation plan, the legislative framework simply doesn't give that possibility at the moment. So that's why I came back to the point about the evaluation of the common fisheries policy, where it's important to make that point that, of course, we know that the framework doesn't give that, but we need to have evidence on why we should develop it differently in the future. And at the moment, that's where we stand.
Jeremy, thanks very much. And I think the more often we say this, the better. Now is the time, in theory, we're being listened to. And now is the time to basically trawl the whole of the EU for people who are going to make that quite clear, that things need to change. But what Owen has said would kind of reflect my experience. I got elected as a sceptic. I got elected because Europe was making us do this, Europe was making us do that. Europe isn't perfect by any means, but what I have discovered is the problem lies at home. But they're not listening at home. So to me, irony from someone who was a Eurosceptic, I'd like to see a situation where the legislation would change, and they would have to do it. Because if they're not willing, it's a bit like I tell my kids, will you do your homework? And if they do it, I don't hassle them. But if they don't do it, then there's a new system put in place where they're left with no choice, and they do it. So I think we need that to happen. I can feel your frustration because it's not on. The next question we have is also for the Commission from Christian Sangouridis from Life Baltic and North Sea Coordinator, if you're here, and give you a minute to ask the question, 2 for Owen to answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the floor. But now, considering what I've heard today, do you mind if I go a little bit off topic? I'm going to come back to my question. But I mean, I think one thing that you really have to understand, and I think especially in DG MARE, is this recognition of how far Europe is lagging behind the rest of the world, especially what's happened since 2014. When you listen to DG MARE, you think, oh, it's been successful. We have an increased proportion of stocks in MSY. Yeah, only if you kind of take into account shifting baselines. If you look at the total volume of fish, we've had about a 25% decline in the amount of available fish in the last decade because of this policy. And, you know, honestly, when you listen to people, you just think this recognition is not there. Compare what's been happening in Europe to what's been happening in America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, even Namibia over the last decade. And it's we in Europe who are lagging behind. And honestly, this like inertia has to stop. I mean, saying like we have no idea, we can't say how they allocate the quotas. Allocation of the quotas leads to non-compliance of other bits of EU legislation. You know, look at what's been happening. It has, lack of implementation of Article 17 means that the landing obligation has just been thrown in the dustbin. You know, where is the policy coherence? So, yeah, I think if you say that, oh, a member state can do what they want, well, actually, if the member state, what they're doing, then means that other bits of legislation can't be implemented, then maybe actually there is a need to have some kind of staff working document which provides a little bit of guidance. Anyway, getting back to my question. Yeah, so I was going to say, so, you know, the idea behind Article 17, you know, it was this idea that you'd reward best practice. You'd provide the fishing sector with a positive incentive. You know, if you fish selectively, then there should be some type of benefit for that. And instead, we've actually seen the opposite, that if you fished unselectively, then you've got a quota boost because there's been the assumption the landing obligation is automatically implemented and automatically complied with, regardless of what happens on the water. So it's actually been this reverse, where you've had a negative incentive, where the people who fish the least selectively have been rewarded the most. And that is what has happened over the last decade. So I think a really good example is with the langoustines. You know, the langoustine fishery, high-value fishery between Sweden and Denmark. You know, we have a gear, we have the Swedish grid, which works. You know, it allows for the cod stock to recover, the cod stock in the Kattegat, which has been down in the dumps, which we're not allowed to fish. We get a bycatch quota for the other guys. The trawl sector, again, they're the ones who benefit from this. And again, we're now seeing over the last decade that the less selective gear is used increasingly, and the selective Swedish grid is not used. So you're seeing, just like with Gwen's example of the bluefin tuna, that we're going backwards. And, you know, quite frankly, going backwards for a decade, I would like to hear a little bit more, okay, we're actually going to turn the trend. Thanks. That was... Yeah.
All right, Owen?
I didn't pick up on a question there, sorry. I take note of the statement.
Sorry. So the question was, why are we now seeing an increase in the use of less selective gear? Surely Article 17 implementation, how can we reverse this trend so that the people using more selective gear are rewarded and incentivized, and that it's them who then get a larger share of the quota? Thanks.
And the next questions are for MEPs. So, all right.
The Commission is doing everything that we can to prioritise the use of more selective gear, to prioritise research partnerships, to give funding under Horizon, also under MFAF shared and direct management directly from the Commission, and also through the Member State programmes. We are really doing our best to promote the development of more selective gear, innovative gear. They're words that we see all of the time in the programmes, and I mean, I don't think there's any deliberate rewarding of anybody for using unselective gear. That's not not the policy.
All right, Owen, thanks for that. We have one question from Billy Croft from the Scottish Creel Fishermen's Federation to MEPs, and after that we have time maybe for about 2 questions from the floor. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hi, sorry, it's Ballyphilp. Yeah, my question is around the implementation, the effective implementation of Article 17. Firstly, I'd like to say I'm not a Eurosceptic. But the common fisheries policy is one of the biggest contentious areas we have in the UK, and it was a mascot that led ultimately to the whole Brexit predicament. So my question is around this. So do you understand that the failure to effectively implement Article 17 played a significant role in the argument for Brexit? And do you realise that there is a danger that fishing communities, not just in the UK but throughout Europe, feel so let down by the failure to implement Article 17 and the Common Fisheries Policy that it threatens not just their fisheries and their ecosystems and their fishing communities, but it actually brings a threat to the European mission in of itself? And can you tell us what you plan to do to address this?
I'm an MEP, so I'm going to answer you first. I agree 100% with what you're after saying. In fact, what you're saying may turn me into a Eurosceptic. I'm not a Eurosceptic. I am on certain areas, but in this area, I wouldn't consider myself a Eurosceptic. And I consistently say it to the Commission. I consistently say it to MEPs. There's this EU project. You want it to work. Maybe it isn't perfect, but we want it to work. But if you have example, this is the equivalent in many people's heads to the straight bananas, a lot of arguments that have been put out there, and it weakens any credibility that we have. But we do know at the end of it that Brexit did happen, and even though those arguments were used, a lot of people are very, very sorry about it now. I'm actually sorry myself. So, but the lesson has to be taken out of it that if there's a message sent out there to the general population who decide whether or not you continue in this project, if the message is, and the message to people in Ireland at the moment is a 15-year-old girl with fishing with a line, fishing pollock, can't fish. I know the details as to why. Then there's the other side, massive trawler on the horizon there, and with bycatch, they're probably catching more than Warren would catch in our whole lifetime by accident. So that is what the public hear. The public have really busy lives. They're trying to pay their bills. They're trying to deal with getting their children to do their homework. A big issue with me at the moment. I just got a text off it, of one of my daughters. She's not doing it. You people only have so much time to focus on the detail of the argument. And what they're saying is the big guy who's from a million miles away, who probably doesn't pay any tax, can do whatever they want, and poor and Wirren can do nothing. You ask the question, does it add towards scepticism? To me, it's the number one driver of it. And obviously, there's the justice you've got to deal with here. The small-scale fishers aren't getting what they want. That's the big issue here. But from the point of view of helping this project, it's a total and utter disaster. So I'd agree with you on that. So maybe, Isabel, if you want to take the question there.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, when it comes to Euroscepticism, there's always this balance between how much power do you want to give to the European Union and how much should be decided on a more national or even local level. And I think with Article 17 was also a result of the will of political parties and also member states to kind of keep the prerogative of distributing or allocating fishing opportunities the way they want. What we managed to get into the legislation was that we need, there shall be objective and transparent criteria. And then more or less the job is up to people at national levels to kind of demand to have these objective and transparent criteria and push politically that you want to have the allocation in a more just and environmentally sustainable way. Now that hasn't worked very well, and I think that's something we need to address now with guidelines from the Commission. We need to highlight this problem very much more, because I still think that we can solve two problems at once if we really have this implemented in member states, that you actually use the allocation of fishing rights to have the fishing fleet abide with the landing obligation, for instance, or if for fishing with selective gears, as Christian was mentioning. You're not supposed to give them more access if they're fishing unselectively and kind of, yeah. But if you're not using these gears, you won't have access to the fish stocks. I mean, that is what's needed. But more generally, I think in member states, it's a lot of kind of the anti-EU forces are always kind of wanting to take credit for whatever is good nationally from their side, and ignoring that the EU might have something to do with it. But as soon as something is bad, then it's the fault of the EU.
Paolo, if you want to talk on that, I suppose in a nutshell, what are we going to do to address this? We get asked that about a lot of things every day, so
thank you.
Good question.
Very brief, just to underline what you just said, we cannot accept that we have not this reciprocity clause. We cannot have people fishing in our waters without complying with what we are obliged to. And I just came from this aquaculture program that was launched by DG MARE also, and one of the things that poses a very big threat to our fishery sector is also the entrance in the European Union of products that came from aquaculture or from fisheries from third countries that doesn't comply with our standards, and this is quite important for us. We need to have this reciprocity, transparency also in this arriving of these products in the European Union. Of course, I totally understand this access that you are fighting for, and especially coming from a fishery zone. Azores is quite well known for these fisheries. I totally defend it, but we need to also take into account the needs. As I defend also in agriculture, we need to have big fishermen also, big companies, big enterprises, and small and local and artisanal fisheries, because it's the question of the sustainability and the strategic autonomy of the European Union also in line. So one of the things could not fight each other. I believe that we should complement each other. because at the end it's the Europeans that will lose if we don't make somehow an agreement, an understanding to access to the quotas and access to some species. So this is quite important for me. It's not to create this division, not to create this negative approach, but ensure that the small fisheries, the less than 12 miles fisheries, the small artisanal fleet have the opportunity to develop their work and also to create conditions in their own communities. And I saw the data that you presented is quite impressive. And of course, we already think about that when we open the fisheries, these large trawlers or the large companies, it will reduce opportunities for the smallest one. It's true. But that is the reason that we need more scientific advice. We need more participation of these council regulations, of these I don't know the name in English, but we have this CC RUP. It's a consultation commission, so it's quite important to have all of this together, seated at the table, and define the main issues for the future. But again, in a complementary way, and for sure, the direct impacts in the coastal communities, in the local communities, come from the small fishers, in the small-scale fisheries. So, totally agree.
Thank you, Paolo. We've time for one, maybe two questions from the audience. Who up there? Put up your hand. Yes, from the back. Introduce yourself there if you can. I know who you are, but the rest...
Hello there. My name is Michael Desmond. I represent NIFA, the National Inshore Fishermen's Association in Ireland. And just with regard to Article 17, obviously DG MARE and the EU Commission have kind of washed their hands of it now for the last 10 years and keep saying it's a national issue. That's the reply we're getting back all the time from our MEPs. It's a national issue. So I'd just like a quick yes or no from each one of the panel, just yes or no. Do they feel like a lot of our members do, that the reason that each member state won't implement it is because of the small-scale sustainable inshore fishermen lacks the inability to make political donations?
Well, I'll tackle that first. To me, from what I've seen since I've delved into this subject, is that the large-scale fishers, without a shadow of a doubt, have far, far more influence with the politicians. That's what I see. But what I do see, and where I do take hope from, is the fact that in the PESH committee, I hear from cross-party the view that small-scale fishers are getting a bad time, that actually needs to change. And where I would take a bit of hope out of it as well is the fact that, well, for a start, I come from one of the few counties in Ireland that doesn't even have a coast. I look at the amount of fishers at this stage left in Ireland, and I look at, from the point of view of the electoral impact that they would have if they all voted for even one candidate. Not a massive amount. But the positive part about that is, even though it doesn't amount to an awful lot of votes, which is sadly the only currency for a lot of politicians, that there is more interest, because I know from my own social media accounts, more interest in the plight of fishermen than there is for farmers, even though there's over 100 and something thousand farmers in Ireland, and there is more of a desire that you get fairness. So the positive that I'd say about it is that at the moment, I definitely think you're not being listened to, but from the point of view of potential to be listened to, the public are on your side, and the MEPs on the PESH committee, one after another, seem to be saying the same thing about how Article 17 needs to be working better, it needs to be changed if necessary, and that there is potential for change. I wouldn't see that for small-scale agriculture on the Agri Committee as much. The main attitude I get from the public about farmers in Ireland, which I think is very unfair, is they don't actually like them. I don't know how the hell that's come about, because they feed them. But the public appear to be on your side. So the answer to it is, at the moment, definitely you don't have enough people pulling in your direction. But events like this help. and you meeting the MEPs from the government parties helps, because up until now they might be able to say to you, we don't understand it, that's why we're not doing anything about it. After this event and you meeting them, they don't have that excuse anymore, so we'll use that as much as possible. So that's the best I can answer your question. If you...
I subscribe. One of the things is to meet the members of the parliament from your member state, from the government, and for sure, one of the, I believe, one of the achievements, the deliveries that we got in Azores is to push every day, every second through the national government. So it's quite important to be very pushy, very insistent. So I think I subscribe what Luke just said.
Thank you. Very, very interesting question. I've asked myself the same question many times. Why are we not doing what we all know that should be beneficial to the public good? And my simple answer is, I don't know. I mean, maybe. I know that some political parties have quite strong connections with some parts of the industry, but if it's kind of translating into financial compensation, I don't know. I have no knowledge of that. But I wanted to also, now that I have the floor, I wanted to kind of connect back to what Jerry was saying, your question. I mean, I think also there is a solution to this, and that is to rebuild stocks. I mean, we can't forget about that. That's kind of the basis of the whole economic activity, that we get back the stocks, and we also get back the stocks inshore, close to land, where the coastal fishermen are. And that can be addressed through the common fisheries policy. And I want to turn back to Article 2.2, which says that we should rebuild and maintain stocks at levels above those that can produce maximum sustainable yield. That means we should not kind of have them at maximum sustainable yield, because maximum sustainable yield is not an abundant state of the ocean. It's rather you fish down like 70% of the virgin biomass, stock biomass, and you keep it at that. That will not create conditions for kind of abundant coastal fisheries, but it will really keep us at a very, very tight level where we're all the time risking stock collapse. So if we rebuild the stocks, I think there will be quite profitable fisheries for coastal fishermen, and we can also keep maybe a certain level for other types of fisheries, but then also consuming less fuel and energy, because with more fish in the ocean, you need less fishing effort. So I think that is kind of also needs to be the basis of this discussion. Thank you.
You want to come back? Yeah, Paolo, you first, and they want to come back with a supplementary, and then we'll have to go to our final speaker because time is limited. But anyway.
Sorry, just on this complaining side, or this requesting side, it's quite important for you, the fishermen, because we are assisting in some member states, even in Portugal, that the sector is gathering through parties that are not in the center, in the ideological situation, in the center right or center left. They are going to more extremist parties. And this is not a very good way to solve things, because my party, for instance, in Portugal, created a sanitary block to the extreme right parties. So if the fishermen are going to talk and to negotiate with these extreme right parties, we will not have any kind of open doors to negotiate. So it's quite important for you to continue to fight for the need, the things that you think it's needed, but be careful, because please don't fall in this trap to go to these propaganda parties or these nationalist parties or the extremist parties. It's only my last question.
And I think that's a very, very good point, because during the election we had a meeting with all the fishers, and the extreme right said, well, the answer is to get the hell out of the European Union. And might sound like great fun for 10 seconds, but after that the reality dawns on you. You've lost your market, you've lost everything. So I would agree with you. I'd agree with you on that. I wish we had more time, but we don't. So if you want to ask a quick supplementary there on top of what you were asking, and then we'll have to go to Emma, the last speaker.
Thanks, Luke. I completely agree with what Isabella was saying there earlier about building up stocks and stuff for the inshore sector again. But that's pointless from where we're sitting at the moment because we then can't access them. What's the point of building them up? We're all the time. That's what we're actually trying to do because of the low impact fisheries that we're involved in and selective gear and all of that. But we're building up the stocks. But as soon as extra stock becomes available, it goes to the other sector. We don't get it. So, we're making a sacrifice, but it's for nothing at the end of the day.
I'd go back to Isabella for a quick answer. I think you'd be surprised. She's far more on your side than people think.
Well, noted, but that is not what I meant. I mean that we should kind of rebuild all the stocks, and with more fish in the sea, we can actually fish less and earn more, and spend less fuel doing it, less time as well, and having resilient ecosystems at the same time. But I understand, and what we want in order to rebuild stocks is, of course, that we need to remove the most destructive fishing activities and also have scientific advice that are really ecosystem based and not only maximum sustainable yield on fishing mortality.
Thank you, Isabella. And I'm sorry we can't take any more questions. I'd love to stay here for another 5 hours because I'm learning so much. But our final and closing remarks and suggested path forward is from MEP Emma Fourreau. She is the coordinator for the Left Group on the PESH Committee. So, Emma, as I say, without further ado.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous et merci beaucoup pour votre présence et pour ces échanges. Merci également à LIFE et à Blue Ventures pour la co-organisation de cet événement. Et évidemment, merci à nos intervenantes et à nos intervenants sur ce sujet essentiel qui est celui de la pêche artisanale, puisque c'est quand même sur ce secteur qu'il faut s'appuyer pour réaliser la transition nécessaire, la transition sociale et écologique des pêches. Et aujourd'hui, au lieu de s'appuyer sur ce secteur, au lieu de soutenir ce secteur, eh bien, les États membres le coulent. Et au détriment, en favorisant la pêche industrielle, qui est une pêche qui n'est viable pour personne, ni pour les océans, ni pour l'économie, ni pour nos emplois. Et alors que la transition, je l'ai dit, elle est nécessaire. Et la pêche artisanale, c'est quoi? C'est un faible impact sur les écosystèmes marins, c'est un faible impact sur les populations de poissons, c'est un usage limité, voire inexistant de carburant. Donc c'est une empreinte carbone plus faible, c'est aussi davantage d'emplois, de valeur ajoutée, et ça renforce le tissu économique justement des côtes et donc de tous les pays. Et au contraire, aujourd'hui, évidemment, on va en sens inverse et on est en train de tuer cette petite pêche, on est en train de tuer les petits pêcheurs. Et derrière, ce n'est pas que les petits pêcheurs qui sont concernés, c'est vraiment tous les autres emplois qui dépendent de ce secteur important. Donc aujourd'hui, on a eu la chance de pouvoir écouter des intervenants divers, donc à la fois des députés du Parlement européen, la Commission européenne, mais aussi et surtout des personnes qui sont concernées, à savoir des pêcheurs et des pêcheuses. Et c'est évidemment pour ça qu'on a fait cet événement, c'est pour pouvoir les écouter et apprendre de leur métier, de leur vécu, parce qu'on rappelle quand même que c'est un métier passion, mais qui est en train de mourir, pas à cause des petits pêcheurs, mais à cause de ceux qui décident à leur place de ce que devrait être la pêche aujourd'hui. Gwen parlait justement de flottilles oubliées, alors qu'on parle de la majorité de la flotte européenne, c'est des pêcheurs artisans, mais qui n'ont aujourd'hui pas voix au chapitre, alors que, voilà, encore une fois, c'est un secteur qui est très important, parce que derrière la pêche, c'est les restaurants, c'est les criers, c'est tout un tas de métiers derrière auxquels on ne pense pas forcément quand on parle de pêche. Et c'est à la fois évidemment un rôle économique, social, mais c'est aussi notre histoire, notre culture qui est à préserver derrière ça. Donc voilà, et à ce sujet aussi, j'aimerais saluer l'importance des femmes dans ce secteur, qui sont souvent minorisées, qu'on ne voit pas dans les statistiques, qui sont souvent ignorées. Et pourtant, il y a des conjointes collaboratrices, il y a des femmes transformatrices, des femmes embarquées aussi. Et évidemment, c'est d'autant plus difficile pour elles parce que pour l'instant, on n'a pas atteint l'égalité de genre dans ce secteur et c'est important d'y travailler également. Et on a de nombreuses femmes pêcheuses qui ouvrent la voie, qui montrent que les femmes n'ont rien à envier aux hommes en mer, elles sont capables de faire ce métier. Je pense notamment à Emmanuelle Marie, qui est une capitaine pêcheuse à Granville en Normandie et qui ouvre la voie et qui représente très fièrement toutes ces femmes pêcheuses qui sont souvent mises de côté. Et évidemment, le sujet principal de notre rencontre aujourd'hui, c'est l'article 17 parce que c'est le nerf de la guerre, c'est ce qui pourrait nous permettre d'avoir une juste répartition des quotas, mais aujourd'hui, cet article est ignoré, n'est pas respecté. Donc c'est ce qui est d'autant plus frustrant, c'est qu'on a une législation qui existe, mais qui n'est volontairement pas appliquée par les États membres, alors que c'est bien écrit noir sur blanc qu'il faut répartir les quotas selon des critères sociaux, environnementaux et écologiques, et ce, de manière transparente. Et aujourd'hui, il n'y a aucune transparence qui est faite sur la répartition de ces quotas, puisqu'on sait très bien dans quelle poche ces quotas vont. C'est dans une poignée de pêcheurs industriels qui tuent la mer, qui tuent l'océan et qui, à moyen terme, va tuer la pêche si on continue de leur donner tous ces quotas. Et ce qui est terrible, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, on a des pêcheurs qui sont obligés d'avoir recours à la justice pour faire appliquer ce droit, alors qu'un pêcheur, normalement, devrait pouvoir pêcher tranquillement. Et au contraire, il faut s'engager dans des batailles juridiques, judiciaires. Et Gwen en sait quelque chose dans le cadre, justement, d'une action en justice sur la répartition du quota de thon rouge, qui, en France, est réparti à 95% pour une poignée de pêcheurs industriels. Et en plus, ces poissons qui sont pêchés ne vont même pas en France, ils sont envoyés au Japon. Donc c'est des thons qui vont être engraissés, envoyés par des cargos surgelés, alors que si on donnait ces quotas aux petits pêcheurs sur la façade atlantique et en Bretagne, il suffirait de quelques poissons par an pour pouvoir en tirer une plus-value, pour pouvoir vivre mieux. Et évidemment, aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas fait. Et le tribunal administratif a condamné la France pour non-respect de cet article. Et voilà, je parle de la France, mais on peut observer ce genre de cas un peu partout en Europe, notamment en mer Baltique, où on a une grosse problématique, qui est que tous les quotas sont donnés à des chalutiers qui pêchent pour faire de la farine, donc même pas pour la consommation humaine, et qui captent tous les quotas et qui sont en train en fait de tuer une mer qui est déjà au bord de l'effondrement, alors qu'à côté, les pêcheurs artisans qui aimeraient pêcher pour la consommation humaine, et donc évidemment c'est beaucoup plus important et légitime que pour faire des farines, eux ne bénéficient pas d'un réel accès préférentiel aux quotas de la pêche, ce qui est absolument injuste. Donc voilà, et il y a aussi un autre enjeu qui a été évoqué aujourd'hui, c'est la question de la transmission. C'est qu'aujourd'hui, c'est un secteur qui, non pas qu'il n'attire plus, mais en fait, on ne donne pas les moyens aux jeunes de pouvoir exercer ce métier, parce que si on n'a pas accès aux quotas, on n'a pas accès aujourd'hui au métier de pêcheur, on ne peut pas transmettre ce métier aux jeunes. Alors après, on a des exemples encourageants, notamment au Danemark, où les petits pêcheurs se sont organisés pour faire face à la privatisation des quotas et qui ont mis en place un système d'accès aux quotas pour les jeunes. Et c'est un exemple en fait qui devrait être généralisé partout pour pouvoir permettre aux générations futures de pouvoir continuer ce métier en respectant évidemment l'environnement marin. Mais quand on parle de pêcheurs, ce sont quand même les premiers à voir l'impact du dérèglement climatique, à voir l'impact sur les populations de poissons, etc. Et donc pour pouvoir continuer à avoir des petits pêcheurs qui protègent la mer, il faut pouvoir transmettre. Et donc ça passe évidemment par les quotas qui, encore une fois, sont vraiment le nerf de la guerre. Mais aujourd'hui, on donne tout à une flotte industrielle qui tue tout sur son passage, qui tue à la fois le métier, qui tue l'environnement. Et c'est pour ça qu'on est là aussi pour rappeler qu'il y a une importance à renouveler les populations de poissons, à préserver les habitats marins et donc à privilégier la pêche artisanale qui a un impact faible, qui utilise des engins sélectifs, etc. Tout a été dit. Et c'est quand même très encourageant de voir qu'on est ici, des députés ici de différents groupes politiques, à porter à peu près le même discours. Alors, il faut espérer que les actes suivent derrière les paroles, mais c'est quand même très encourageant de voir que aujourd'hui, plus personne n'ose fermer les yeux sur la condition des pêcheurs artisans, parce qu'on sait que c'est la honte, parce qu'on sait qu'on est en train de tuer ce secteur qui est pourtant extrêmement important pour la population, pour l'économie. Et donc, ça fait partie des actes à poser, ce genre d'événements, pour mettre justement cette question au cœur de nos politiques et de nos considérations. Parce que, comme l'a rappelé Bengt Larsson, effectivement, là, le système de pêche actuel est en train de tout tuer. On a fait n'importe quoi ces dernières décennies, donc il est temps de s'en rendre compte et, évidemment, de bifurquer, de faire cette transition, parce que ce qui est encourageant, c'est qu'on a tous les éléments. En fait, il suffit d'encourager la pêche artisanale, de favoriser ce modèle, de renverser le rapport de force, parce que c'est justement ce secteur qui crée le plus d'emplois, en fait, tous les voyants sont en vert avec la pêche artisanale. Ce qui manque, c'est le soutien politique, c'est les moyens donnés à ce secteur. Et donc on est ici justement pour promouvoir le fait qu'il faut appliquer l'article 17, qu'il faut restaurer les populations de poissons, que s'il n'y a plus de poissons dans l'océan, il n'y aura plus de pêcheurs. Donc il y a quand même un impératif à protéger les écosystèmes et les populations de poissons. Et je crois que il est temps de conclure, mais je pense qu'on a été assez clair avec ce panel sur le fait qu'il faut appliquer l'article 17 et respecter enfin les petits pêcheurs et leur donner voix au chapitre, parce qu'aujourd'hui, alors que vous êtes la majorité des pêcheurs, ce ne sont pas vous qui sommes écoutés dans les instances de représentation, qui sommes consultés dans la répartition des quotas. Donc il y a aussi un enjeu démocratique à faire en sorte que la petite pêche soit représentée et soit présente durant les négociations qui concernent la pêche. Je vous remercie.
Anna's going to come in for a sec. Okay. Thank you very much, Emma. And I've just spotted a very, very good attender of the PESH committee, and someone who, before I was on the PESH committee, taught me quite a bit about it on one of our missions. So I know we're very short on time, and there's someone going to kill me out there for extending this for another minute. But Anna Miranda, if you want to say something for a minute, and then we'll wrap it up there. So thanks everyone for coming. We leave it to you, Anna Miranda.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the conference. I'm deputy from Galicia, I'm a MEP from Galicia, and I want to attract your attention and your solidarity with a mega project that we are suffering now with the government, that is a macrocellulose that can have an impact in our small-scale fisheries. Look that. This was on Saturday. Look, 50,000 persons fighting for our rights, for our land, for our fisheries, and for our way of life. And today, this is the paper, Altri no. And he is a fisherman, one of the best fishermen of our country, Rogelio Santos Queiruga. Only 20 seconds, please, but I want that you are listening in this parliament, please.
Buenos días a todos, muchísimas gracias. Mis bisabuelos eran pescadores, mi padre era pescador, mi abuelo era pescador, mi madre mariscadora. Yo llevo 30 años trabajando en el mar. Este último año hemos devuelto especies protegidas con hueva, crustáceos con hueva, especies que no dan la talla, por valor de más de 25.000 euros en una pequeña embarcación en la que trabajamos solo 2 personas. Hay que tener una pesca que debe ser respetuosa con el medio ambiente, favorecer la pesca artesanal, pero también hay proyectos que ponen en peligro nuestro modo de vida. El sector marisquero en Galicia, donde soy pescador, está sufriendo la peor crisis de la historia, el sector del derecho, mejillón, almeja, y tenemos que parar este proyecto que lo está poniendo en peligro gravemente. Tenemos que proteger las cosas de comer y a los miles de trabajadores del mar que en Galicia representan tantos, solamente los mariscadores, como Inditex o Citroën. Muchísimas gracias.
Okay, thank you very much. You've echoed a lot what was said there, and thank you, Anna, and thanks to everyone for coming here. We're not going to change everything here today, but we have hopefully changed something a little bit, alerted the powers that be, how people feel, and I just want to thank the MEPs, thank the organisations, and I want to thank Owen for coming into the Lion's Den to answer questions, and I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, that's it.